So what you do is when you pull the hammer back, so this gun's totally loaded, you have to push down the hammer before you even pull the trigger. And once you do that, it enables you to...
Hello and welcome to Intoxicated Masculinity. We talk about drinking culture, pop culture, politics, and anything else that comes up. Joining me as always is Brandon.
Hello, my people.
Jim.
Hello, everybody.
And Kale. All right, so we're doing our second episode on guns. Last week, we sort of talked more about the regulations and a lot of the more of the concrete stuff. This week, I wanted to kind of talk about, have more kind of a free-form discussion than we did last week, just about guns and their relation to other stuff in society and what we kind of think about that. So the first thing I want to bring up, and we're just kind of round robin here, and people talk whenever they want to. One of the things that I've noticed is a problem with guns and the relationship with guns in this country has to do with the media. Now, the NRA will oftentimes blame, gun violence is because of the media, whatever that means. I do think there is a grain of truth there that I thought we might talk about a little bit. When I watch action movies in the theater, because we're going back to the theaters now, because COVID's done, right? Maybe. Anyway, and the thing that I notice and started noticing when I started noticing it and noticed it more is the idea that the person with the gun is always the one that solves the problem. That when you watch a movie, whether it's an action movie or a Western or sometimes even superhero movie, the person with the gun is the one telling people how it is and the one that is sort of the solution to the problem. And I believe that is sort of driven into the heads of a lot of Americans. We talked about 1980s cartoons a lot on this channel recently. And the guy with the gun is often the good guy and the one who's solving everything. What do you guys think about that?
I blame that on Greek mythology, people with swords and arrows going around solving all the problems. So I don't know. I get where you're coming from. And
there wasn't a lot of mass arrowing, though.
This is true. I'm just saying action heroes aren't recent development, but
I think, and I want to push back on that a little bit because I think I have a little bit of a counter argument to that. If you look at Hercules or a lot of the other characters of the era, they were either smarter than or used their physical prowess to outdo their enemies. Whereas in many movies now, the character is better with guns. And so the gun is inextricably intertwined with why the hero is successful.
All right. I present to you Robin Hood.
Who?
Exactly.
I don't know if Robin Hood is the best example of a modern action hero. Kevin Costner clearly did the best one. So why are we even talking about him anymore?
Somebody pre-guns that was using weapons to solve all the problems. But I don't think you're completely wrong.
I appreciate that. No, I get it. And I'm not saying this is an absolute. It's just something that struck me when I started to notice the idea of guns being intertwined with being right. I don't know. Brandon or Kale, what do you think?
Well, and it's not just being right. It's also being, when you picture somebody with a gun, they're usually the type of person that are like T-shaped and 0% body fat, and it's not only that you're right, it's also that you're male. Even those with, like, most female action heroes don't have a gun. They're like martial artists or the pilot or something. There isn't a whole lot of them also being the one with the, but even they are like action figure worthy, and it's a whole message wrapped up into a 2-hour sit on your couch and pretend like you did something fast.
But imagine a John Wayne movie without a gun. Go ahead, Kale. Sorry.
To Brandon's point, it's kind of like along the lines I was thinking. it's a very masculine portrayal, because, like you said, okay, the guy with the gun is right, because the gun represents power. That's power. That's intimidating.
What
It's
else
like,
does the gun represent, Kale?
his wang, I guess. I don't
It
know.
represents his potency. Yeah,
But
we're
no,
gonna make the dick gun
in
connection.
the
I'm
gun
sorry
is
if
in
that offends you.
of the gun in the hands of the bad guy is scary, and the power of the gun in the hands of the good guy is relieving. But really, that's scary too, because either one of them can shoot somebody. And shooting people is bad, whether you're a good guy or a bad guy. As soon as you're a good guy that shoots somebody else, how good are you?
Well,
So-
also in films, oftentimes the person who is the good guy always shoots the right person.
So I would kind of like to use this discussion of good guys and bad guys to segue into good guys and bad guys, because I hear all the time that the solution is to have more
Smooth.
good guys with guns, and there's been such loosening of who can carry a gun and where. Like, if I see somebody with a gun, how do I know if they're a good guy or a bad guy? People
Better
aren't.
shoot 'em.
It's not Westworld. People aren't walking around with white hats and black hats.
Um,
That's
I
a
most-
big argument too.
Well,
The
let's
gun
say
is there. The gun doesn't
Well-
protect you from anybody. If anything, it makes you a threat. A shield is protection. Are you going to shield yourself with your gun? How many bullets can you deflect with your gun?
Well, most
in a
famously,
way-
there was the shooting. And Brandon, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I'll get right over to you. There was the shooting of Gabby Giffords in Arizona, which was incredibly tragic. And when the shooter, whose name I'm not going to mention because fuck that guy, he was taken down by the crowd when he stopped to reload. And somebody from a local who's at a local, I think it sticks in my mind, it was a local restaurant, came around because he heard the shots, and he almost shot the person that disarmed the killer. And it's nothing against that guy. I want to be clear. I'm not yelling at that guy for having almost done that thing, because he was trying his best. But the one
be
thing they don't
good,
talk about in the civilian world a lot is the tactical use of firearms. And the tactical use of firearms is incredibly complicated. And you don't know if you're shooting the right person. Like Jim says, people don't wear white hats and black hats in real life. What if you shoot somebody and all of a sudden that was the person that disarmed the killer? I mean, how would you feel for the rest of your life knowing that you shot an innocent person, and not just an innocent person, but an innocent person who had disarmed a mass shooter?
And
Brandon, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it depends on if you're a cop. If you're a cop, you'd be okay with it.
Well, right.
Well, that's the thing. It's also in their head. They're watching this little movie where they're the hero. But who says the movie started when you started perceiving it? You're that guy. You come around the corner and you see somebody with a gun and everybody's down and there's dead bodies and you think, oh, finally my chance. But that's the guy that disarmed. That's not the guy that was shooting. It's the guy that got the gun away from the guy. I mean, when it comes to other people's motives, we reason differently for why they're doing a thing than why we ourselves do the thing. The type of reasoning that goes
So I
into
think-
it is always different.
Basically, what Jim is trying to say is what we just said when we talked over him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
we're
why
just
I always
clever.
talk over Jim.
It's a good thing he doesn't.
Like I said, I'm kind of doing, we're kind of doing a little bit loosey-goosey of a discussion this week. So what other stuff, again, last week we talked a lot about statistics and court cases and stuff like that. And Jim, let's go to you since I talk over you. What other things do you think are kind of related, but maybe not related to guns in the US? Like I mentioned kind of the way they're portrayed in the media. What do you have to say about that or related to that?
So I'm going to take a little detour here.
Please
and
do.
talk about regulations and how the Supreme Court has kind of said, the federal government, state government, your city can't regulate gun usage, but I go to my gym and my gym says you can't have a firearm. I mean, I understand corporations are people, my friend, but I'm getting a little bit tired of continually finding out that corporations have more rights than I do and more rights than my government does. It's like they're a super entity.
They're in charge.
So can my neighborhood incorporate? Like, we're a company now and you can't have guns in our neighborhood? Is that okay? Like, I don't get that.
There's actually something incredible related to that. So I own some stocks. And when I say some stocks, I mean very few stocks. I am not a tycoon. But we had a thing where when you own stock, you'll get an invitation to the annual meeting, which I don't go to because it's in New York City, and New York City is a little ways away. And I'm not going to go there for a vote. I'm going to go there for pizza and food. So what I noticed is all these board votes would have all these things where the board of the company will recommend you vote for or against it. And you'll be surprised to know that every single time the board recommends you vote for the new executive compensation package. I know, shocking, right? The executive board says we should approve the executive compensation package. But there's a bunch more people that have been getting into buying stocks that are, fairly progressive and that are pushing companies to do these things. And you'll have like, hey, let's have a committee to assess racism or, a whole bunch of other things. And the boards are like, nah, we shouldn't do that. Surprisingly enough.
It's amazing when the narrative flips that moment. Like, states' rights, states' rights, states' rights, try and ban guns. No, the states can't do anything.
All of a sudden they care about the 14th Amendment, which they never fucking cared about before.
So what's the right-wing lobbying think tank that goes around? Acorn, is that it?
No, Acorn was left-wing before they were basically put out of business by the right-wing.
Then what's it called?
Cato?
I think it begins with an A. They go around a lot of local governments and pass out agendas that they want.
I know who you're talking about. I can't think of the name of it. Yeah, they write a lot of the laws, and then the legislatures pretend like they wrote them.
Yeah,
I just
can't. There's also AIPAC, but that's more related to the right-wing government in Israel, which that's a whole episode in and of itself. Anyway, Jim, you go ahead. I've kind of or not.
So I was just going to say, kind of while we're on the topic of corporations limiting the usage of guns, if corporations are rational, they make capitalist decisions, and more guns equal more safety, then why don't corporations say, hey, bring as many guns into our stores as you want? Why does Supreme Court not allow guns in the Supreme Court? Well, obviously because it's not safe. And if it's not safe at the Supreme Court, it's not safe at my grocery store, it's not safe in my gym. Why is it safe everywhere else?
I think that the easy answer is,
by the way.
Alec, yes, you're right.
Fireworks are unsafe. Chainsaws are unsafe. Should we regulate that?
Well, probably to some degree.
I mean, if there was 50 people marching around the Capitol with chainsaws, maybe.
No,
but
I
if
think
it's my replacement hand.
We live in an age of unprecedented levels of bullshit. I mean, there is just so much bullshit out there that it's hard to, I feel like every day you look at social media and you're just sifting through bullshit. And we sort of talked about this a little bit when we were talking about the debate episode and about how debate is so difficult because there are so many people that put all these you can put 25,000 crazy ideas out there in 5 seconds, whereas it takes you 25 hours to debunk each one of those. And it's so inefficient. So,
it's got a name. It's called the Gish Gallop.
I'm not going to say that because it sounds ridiculous, but yes, you're right.
Dump logical fallacies on you just until you go numb and just give up.
Right. It's sort of for those of us that have worked in corporate, it kind of reminds you of that, where people just dump, kind of bullshit on you until you just kind of accept it. I mean, none of the arguments that pro-gun people come up with are really deeply valid. I think that every argument, because, we talked last week, I think the argument that Brandon brought up and the argument that Kale brought up are not invalid. I don't think those are invalid arguments, but I think they are valid with some degree of qualification, where it's like, okay, yes, but there are no pro-gun arguments out there that are just unqualifiedly good logical arguments. They just don't exist. But the problem is, and it's funny. This is sort of like a parallel back to, the early 2000s when we were getting ready to go into Iraq and go to Afghanistan. The modus operandi is not to win the argument. And this is the sort of primary goal of the pro-gun people. You don't have to win the argument. You just have to try and argue that, there's arguments on both sides, could go either way. And if you can get to that point, if you can get to the point where people are like, well, I don't know, maybe one way, maybe the other way.
Or now's not the time to talk about gun control.
Or maybe now's not the time to talk about gun control. It's just like you sort of argue to this, just like, well, who knows, kind of a thing. And it is goddamn infuriating.
Here, I have a fun little exercise for you guys.
I've exercised enough.
I have been told by someone in my personal life that it's good that so many Americans are armed because of the events happening in the world today, that there's the possibility of all-out war. And that, okay, just bear with me here, just humor me a minute. Say their argument was valid. Say that, like, Russia / China / the Red Menace.
By the way, Kale, when you said, let's say their argument is valid, I wanted to go, their argument is valid.
They invade us.
The
Okay.
Canadians are coming.
And there's a ground war on U.S. soil. So now all the people that are like, I need these weapons to protect myself, now all of a sudden they're proven right. How do you think that breaks down? How does that work out? I mean,
it sounds like a right-wing masturbatory fantasy that is so incredibly unlikely that it's not really worth entertaining. What country would be invading us? That's what I'm not clear on.
How exactly?
I mean, first of all, China has no interest in invading us. China has interest in overtaking us as a global power, but they certainly don't have ships off the coast of Los Angeles. Mexico is not getting ready to take back Las Cruces from us. Canada's not going to steal Buffalo, even if we might, rather they did.
Hitler actually approached Mexico to try to get them to fight us.
It's the Zimmerman telegram. Very aware of that, but they didn't. And that was, that's 100 years ago when they might have stood a spark of a chance against us. It's goofiness. It's like cosplaying. And it's not even good cosplaying. It's bad cosplaying.
It's LARPing.
Yeah, I mean, if something like that happened, I think having an AR-15 isn't going to really help you very much.
Once again, it's the argument the government's going to come get you. What are you going to do against tanks and aircraft carriers?
I think in their mind, though, they think picture themselves red donning it. They have like a piece of a shirt tied around their head, and they've got like a big gun here, and
well, I think that probably
behind chest high walls shooting at things.
That's just your average Thursday for me, man.
All walls are chest high to me. I don't even know what that means. But like geopolitically, I think what they're probably thinking about is Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a country that has fought off the Soviet Union and the United States to some degree. But they are a country that is so much massively different from the United States that it's not funny. Yeah, the Afghanis were able to survive the Soviet Union, and the Afghanis were able to survive
because we were helping them too.
Well,
yeah, I was going to say it's not because they had a great gun department at Walmart. It's because the CIA was supplying weapons.
By the way, just everybody go watch Rambo 3. Like watching Rambo 3 today is just like, wait, what?
You mean like the
Go
part
watch Charlie Wilson's War, or better yet, read the book.
plays-
Well, actually, Charlie Wilson's War and Rambo 3 would really be great, sort of two films to watch together. Yeah, the Afghanis definitely had significant help from us. But that being said, the Afghani people are just different from the American citizens. The Afghani people are incredibly rural. They have lived on their own. They've been fighting wars for a long, long time. Americans, these people that are like call themselves these rugged individualists. It's like you're on Twitter, like you're saying you're going to fight off you're going to fight off the tyrannical government, but you get banned on Twitter and throw a fit. It's like, come on, man, you're not that tough. Like tough people don't get mad they got kicked off of Twitter. They just don't. And so the idea that people sort of, it's like they believe the US, it's like, oh, we could be Afghanistan and fight off this sort of mythical tyrannical government that's going to take our guns away.
As it stands, we're never going to be the underdog.
Yeah.
It would take more than one country to make us be the underdog.
Yeah.
It's a shame that we don't use.
And if Trump was in charge, those nukes come into play. Well, I don't know that. That's not true of Biden, but I mean,
we could use
nobody's going to do
technology for so much better purposes than killing each other.
Yeah, but killing each other is so much fun for the upper class. One other thing I wanted to get into, and this is going to be kind of a more, again, like I said, more loosey-goosey episode. And I know the gun people hate it when I bring this up because they've messaged me before on the Twitter and the Facebook. And this is sort of gun ownership as a replacement for masculinity. We are a channel called Intoxicated Masculinity. And we've never actually done an episode about masculinity, which we probably should get to at some point.
I think I'm going to be busy that week.
Well, clearly you're not masculine enough to talk about masculinity.
You should see the size of my balls.
Yeah, that's something. But no, the idea of people having guns as sort of a replacement for masculinity. Like I have, 6 AR-15s and 7 shotguns, and they all have super long barrels. And it's just like, it's there. I understand they hate that comparison, but like, they hold it there. It's like all related, like the dick and the gun, they're just so close together and they serve the same purpose. And it's just like, how am I not going to mention that? I don't know.
Freud was not wrong.
I don't know about Jim. Brandon's had some experience with firearms. I know Mike's had experience with firearms. I grew up around firearms. It's not like we don't like guns, not because like we think that they're terrible and we're afraid of them or anything like that. It's just like we see that there's not really a use for them that propagates humanity. It doesn't help in any positive way.
Well, actually, Cale, you bring up a good point. Brennan, what is your experience with firearms? Just like throughout your life?
Oh, man. I had a shotgun for a little while. Shot up a couple of cars that didn't work anymore.
And a shoe.
Cale's emotional uncle had a fuckload of guns, and we went out shooting some of those. His dad had a shotgun that we went out and shot a tree in half.
Ron Rice.
Yeah. Then, Mike, you had some small number of guns that we took out shooting a few times.
I had AR-15 and 2 Glocks and a couple shotguns, I think.
And this Saturday Night Special.
Yeah, my little 38, which I talked about last episode. Jim, what's your experience, personal experience with firearms?
So I grew up in rural Iowa. We had a shotgun and a rifle. I've shot both of those. We probably use them once every 2 weeks, shooting raccoons or possums or skunk or whatever that were around. I remember shooting guns at scout camp. I shot shotguns at a school retreat at Springbrook Park. My kids have shotguns, but I don't have one in my house.
Like I said, I owned an AR-15, a couple of Glocks. I had at least 2 shotguns, and I think I had a rifle too, but I don't remember.
You had a Mossberg, right?
No, I had a Remington 870 Express. And then obviously I was in the Army. When I was in the Army, I was a unit armorer when we were back at Hood. So I can take apart an M4, an M16, 240 Bravo, a SAW, Mark 19.
You had a squad automatic weapon.
I fired a Ma Deuce at the range one time, which is a 50 caliber machine gun, which was cool, scary at the same time. My just randomly, I'll give my favorite range story. We had one of the soldiers was firing a SAW on the range, and we had 2 lieutenants. Which, by the way, every joke in the Army starts off with there was 2 lieutenants, and they did something incredibly stupid. It was the company XO and somebody, and I can't remember the other guy. It was 2 first lieutenants. And I was the range armor. And so we had one of the soldiers say he was firing his SAW, and it stopped firing. A SAW, by the way, is a squad automatic weapon, as Kale says. It's a belt fed machine gun. And the soldier stated that he had finished off, and that the receiver had been locked in the forward position. And so we had been screwing with this stupid rifle forever, trying to get it to work and blah, blah, blah. And finally, the XO, is the company executive officer, grabbed the barrel of said machine gun, put it right into his crotch, and started kicking the charging handle on the weapon. And I think on the 4th or 5th kick, the receiver finally gave way, and a live round went shooting end over end out of the weapon. And it was the 2 lieutenants, myself, and the range NCOIC. And we all just kind of looked at each other like, oh, well, that could have been terrible. Hence the reason why even people that work with guns every day have mistakes.
They're still human beings.
And that's why even your bullshit, 2 hours the range every week does not make you a gun expert.
Well, it probably had 2 rounds got.
Probably. I mean, we could
2 rounds love each other very much.
They go right into the lieutenant's balls.
Sometimes have a tendency to double up on each other. And anyway, no. And I think that's another important point too. Like whether it's a police officer, a military person, or just your neighbor who lives down the gravel road that has, 50 weapons, that person's still a human being. There's still something inside there behind all that facade that you can attempt to reach out to and reason with and be logical with. And I think that's since we're on it right here, right now, I'm going to just say that I feel like when it comes to the anti-gun argument, just coming right at them and being like, I don't want you to have guns. Nobody should have guns. I think they should take all the guns away. It leads down a path of great difficulty. And we really need to be just like reaching out to our neighbors, to our fellow humans, and just being like, I have a logical, reasonable thought process that I want you to consider, and I want to win you over. I don't want to force you to do anything. I want you to see why this is the way things should be. And I realize that, okay, that's, a bit of a dream. And a lot of people would just immediately brush that off. But I think it's a far better option than I'm going to say things and do things to make you angry so that when I do try to convince you that that you should give up your gun, that you're going to see me as an enemy, because I don't want you to see me as I am not your enemy. I'm your friend. I'm your fellow human being, and I'm trying to convince you to stop doing this thing that destroys society.
Well, Kale, I would like to defend myself from your vicious attacks. And thankfully I'm armed, so I can defend myself. No, what I'd like to say is that I do believe the guns should be banned eventually. I understand the guns aren't going to be banned tomorrow. So I am absolutely willing to take the steps necessary to get there. So if there is somebody that's going to say, okay, let's do this, interval step between these things, I'm 100% for that. I'm 100% for compromise. But ultimately, I do believe guns are bad, as Mr. Mackey would say. Guns are bad. Okay.
Okay, kids.
Jim, we haven't talked to you for a little while. What do you think?
I think when I engage with my friends about guns, I try and present it as, is this chart behind me? Is this okay? Is it just a statistical anomaly? Are all the other countries going to catch up to us, or are we doing something wrong? And if we're doing something wrong, what should we do about it? We just say, well, that's the way it is. We're just the worst in the world with gun deaths, and that's the price we pay for freedom, I guess.
But I think that's one of the problems with it. It's one of those things when you're talking to somebody on a person-to-person level, you could get those kind of compromises of like, yeah, we shouldn't allow everybody to buy guns at gun shows. That's crazy. Nobody really believes that. But the money that's being pumped into politicians is all for no gun restriction of any kind ever, ever, ever. So it's one of the things that's so weird about this country, that where we as citizens can come to terms, but it doesn't matter because our opinion doesn't matter.
What's weird is this, like, you have arguably the same, excuse me, arguably the same people who are in favor of the death penalty. And you're like, but sometimes innocent people will just necessarily be put to death. And they're like, well, that's the price you pay. Sometimes you gotta, whatever their excuses, break a few eggs or whatever.
Want to make an omelet.
It's like, well, then why do that at all? And I wonder it seems to be almost the same argument here. It's like, we have, 10,000 gun deaths in, like 10 years or whatever it is. And it's like, well, that's just the price you pay for this.
That's actually a really...
But this is like the shittiest situation. Why would we pay this price at all? It's like if I went into a store and was going to buy a stereo and parts were missing and shit. It's like, well, it's $10,000 because all of the parts are broken. Well, let's make something that isn't and see how that works.
Brandon, just to pad your number there, in the last 3 years, if you do the math, in the U.S., there have been roughly about 100,000 gun deaths.
That's insane. I don't know. It just seems like in America, as a narrative, kind of a meta narrative, we're just death obsessed. Like the whole nation's kind of under this death cult thing, and I don't get it.
I don't think it's so much that. What I think it is that we have been convinced that a bunch of things that are true, that aren't true, are true. And what's important. And this idea that freedom, this sort of unqualified word, that has so many different meanings and in different contexts. Freedom is important. but what the fuck does that mean? What does it mean freedom is important? So does
I've heard
mean,
that difference made between freedom to and freedom from.
well, also like
Or
what do we mean by like, so
freedom for the individual versus freedom for all.
well, also freedom to what? Like, can you pay a prostitute to have sex with you? Can you pay somebody to buy marijuana? That's freedom, but we hate that. And so it's this idea, it's just like we convince people that these words have this power that they don't have, like freedom. And, there's lots of things we don't have freedom to in this country.
I think
Things that make way more sense than
don't fuck with you. Sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying things that make way more sense to have freedom. Regulated prostitution makes way more sense than unlimited gun access or 3D guns or whatever. I mean,
yeah, Australia got rid of guns and has legalized prostitution, and they're happy. Just saying.
I think we've kind of gone through this a little bit. I think we might come back to this if we get some comments and people challenging. I don't mind coming back to this. I think one interesting way to close out would be if you could talk to the pro-gun people in our audience, and we care about you. Like, we don't hate you. We don't want bad things to happen to you. We want you to be safe. If you could say one thing to those people, whether it's a statement or a question, what do you think you would say to those people, sort of person to person? Because again, we very much get into this stuff, like in the Twitter debates where we're very much like, well, my side says this and your side says that. What would you say to those people just on a person to person level, if you could? Brandon, why don't you go first?
Tough to say. I guess it'd be centered around whatever my personal objective was. If it's just to figure out what they think, would be different than if I was trying to convince them to think something different. I don't know. I would say there's people out there that care about you. And especially since like half of gun deaths are suicides, there's people out there that care. There's people out there willing to listen. There's people out there who have been in your situation and come out of it. And what's that thing Dan Savage says? Things will get better.
It gets better.
Yeah. I think that would even qualify for people who go on these rampages, because clearly things have gone wrong. Somewhere along the line, things have gone off the rails. And again, I'm not going to play armchair psychologist. I couldn't tell you what it is. But there's no doubt that talking to somebody who really wanted to help them could have helped them out of that situation.
Yeah, I would believe a lot of those people are experiencing incidents in their life that some kind of intervention, maybe not an official intervention, but just like somebody being like, hey, what's going on? Everything's going to be okay. Could help out. Jim, what about you?
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on what kind of category a person falls into. I feel like most of my friends and acquaintances that I have talked to about guns kind of fall into just two general categories, like one that's just generally pro-gun and doesn't really see it as a problem, and another group that's more concerned that their gun rights are going to be taken completely away tomorrow. And I kind of already alluded to, previously, first category of friends, and just say, this is the situation where we're at with guns and gun violence in this country. Is this good? Like, do you like that we have military police? Is it okay with you that we are off the charts with gun homicides compared to everyone else? Like, is that a a good trade-off, unlimited gun rights with huge deaths, and if it's not, what do you think about it? And then the group of friends that are worried about their guns being taken away, I just kind of ask them why. Why are you so concerned about it? Like, what indication have you gotten that your guns are going to be taken away? And were you worried about that last year and the year before that and the year before that? And it's been a long time since even automatic weapons had restrictions on them in the country. I really don't understand where the fear that all the guns are going to be taken away and I need to, I don't know how else to put it, hoard guns. Like, I can understand if somebody feels like they need a rifle and a shotgun for hunting and they want a handgun for home defense. I think it's statistically not a good idea, but I understand it. But I don't understand like why you would want to have 20 guns, why you would want to have an AR-15. I don't get it.
I think there is a problem with the US of hoarding everything. Like, people have this idea that, well, I have 3 and now I need 4 and now I need 5 and now I need 12 and now I need 60. And it's like, it's entirely irrational. It's not rational. It's just the idea of like, what is the answer? And the answer always is more.
Well, and every time there's a Democrat president in charge, there's always this, he's coming to take your guns. But they can't point to a single time that anybody said they're going to. They can't point to any plan on the books. I mean, the last time I can even think of a Democrat saying anything remotely like that was back when we had Tom Harkin, and he said he wouldn't mind putting all the guns on a barge and drowning it in the ocean.
Well, I mean,
That's
the last
it.
time a president did it was Bill Clinton, and that was the assault rifle ban, which was very, very weak.
Yeah.
I mean, Barack Obama was in charge for 8 years and no gun reform. Joe Biden's been in charge for almost 2 years and no gun reform. Not even suggested.
Who was it? Didn't
Go ahead.
Beto O'Rourke say he was going to come for your guns?
Come for your AR-15s. He's running for Texas governor, by the way. He was very fond of standing on things.
Well, a slab of toast would be better than Greg Abbott. So.
Well, that's very true. All right, Kale, what about you? Again, you're talking to the people you know or the people you don't know that are very pro-gun.
I have
what would you like to tell them?
talked to friends and family about my stance on firearms. Here, just from a philosophical point of view, when Cain hit Abel in the head with a rock was the first time some human used a weapon to kill another human. And since then, we've exceeded at damaging each other. We excel at it. We are superb at destroying each other. And that's a sad fact of humanity. The idea that in 2020 was the highest ever number of gun deaths that we ever had, and 54% of them were suicide. In 19 and 20 here in Iowa, 79 and 70, almost 75% consecutively of gun deaths were suicide. In that argument, I will say, I'm doing you a favor by taking that gun out of your hand, because I am decreasing the odds that 70 some percent of my fellow Iowans are going to end their life with a gun. I know that number fluctuates. Not 70% of Iowans, but 70% of gun deaths are suicides preventable in Iowa. And I would just want to say to my friends and family that are pro-gun that I just want to remind you I'm not your enemy. And I'm not trying to take your guns away. I'm trying to regulate them. I'm just trying to regulate them. And I think that if you can see where I'm coming from, you can meet me halfway, because I see where you're coming from and I want to meet you halfway. If you can meet me halfway, that's a starting point. And then we can continue to negotiate. And that's my opening volley.
I appreciate that. I think I'm going to end with, by the way, people playing the intoxicated masculine drinking game, prepare to drink, a Kurt Vonnegut quote. And it comes from Breakfast of Champions, which is one of my favorite of his books. They did a really good movie about that one, starring Bruce Willis, who unfortunately just had to retire from acting under kind of tragic circumstances. But so in the book, the main character, if you watch the movie, Bruce Willis's character is having a lot of problems, and Kurt Vonnegut is a part of the book. He's the writer of the book and also part of the book. And he said that many people need desperately to receive this message. I feel and think much as you do, care about many of the things you care about, although most people do not care about them. You are not alone. And I feel like a lot of people in the gun spaces do feel and are meant to feel that they are alone. They are sort of these lone guardians and don't understand that they're surrounded by people that care about them and people that want the best things for them. Yeah, just to reiterate what Kurt Vonnegut said, you're not alone. You're not alone. And that's the only thing I have to say. We care about you and we don't want you hurt. And that's it.
Is this the part where you play the General Zod "You Are Not Alone" thing from Man of Steel?
I probably won't, but who knows? Brennan, do you have any final thoughts on this?
No, I think we covered it.
Dense topic. Jim.
I have one last thing to say. I feel like a lot of people that advocate for gun rights, at the root of their concern is they want to feel safe. And one of the things that I try to express to them is I also want to feel safe, and having guns everywhere makes me feel unsafe. I don't know how to round that corner, but having guns everywhere doesn't make me feel safe. It makes me feel unsafe.
There's a big chart right behind you that shows a lot of evidence to what you're saying.
All right, Cale, last thoughts.
Peace.
It's not a bad way to go. All right, I want to thank everybody for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and be good to each other.
We're coming for you.
This is a 12-gauge birdshot. Also, this weapon has this cool feature where you press the trigger down, and once you press this down and pull it up,